my pleasure to introduce Laura J. Ray, attorney at law. Laura is a native of Fenton County and a graduate of Fenton County High School. She attended the University of Georgia and obtained a Bachelor of Arts in History in 1996. She attended Mercer University School of Law, obtained a Juris Doctor in 2000. After practicing with firms of Aiken and Tate and White, Choate and Watkins, both of Cartersville, she opened her firm at Blue Ridge in 2005. Her firm provides services in all areas of real estate closings, disputes and litigation, corporate law, wills and estates, and general civil practice. She's a member of the Georgia Bar Association, Georgia Trial Lawyers Association, Real Property Section of the State Bar, Appalachian Bar Association, and the Rotary Club of Blue Ridge, Georgia. We were fortunate to have her at the Fenton County Brokers meeting a month or so ago, and she is here today to share the program with us. Please make Laura Ray welcome.
Before we begin with the discussion today, I want to thank you all for having me here today. It's my pleasure to come up here and talk to y'all about the Mortgage Disclosure Improvement Act of 2008. And I'd especially like to thank Donna Bragg for the personal invitation to come up here today. I appreciate that. As Farron was saying in my office, my firm is located in Blue Ridge, Georgia. I am a native of Blue Ridge, and it is a thrill to be able to practice and have your business in a community base that you're so familiar with, and the people that you work with are folks that you live next to. That's really a great benefit. My office, we do handle real estate closings. That's actually a large section of my firm's practice, and we handle closings all over the North Georgia area. So we cover a broad area base, and in fact, the way the market is today, we actually have received title requests from closings for Fulton County because clients that use me, they want to know their transactions are handled confidently and appropriately, and we're always happy to accommodate, even in areas such as Fulton, which may not be a practice area that we see regularly in Blue Ridge. What I want to speak to you today about is the Mortgage Disclosure Improvement Act that was enacted July 2008 as an amendment to the Truth in Lending Act, and as it was subsequently amended. A little bit about the history of this act. RESPA, which is a term you're probably familiar with, this is the Real Estate Settlement Practices Act. RESPA was the topic of great concern in the spring of 2008 as HUD undertook to heighten the level of consumer protection by increasing the amount of disclosure required. In light of the current credit and housing crisis, the prevailing theme of the discussion last year surrounding the proposed and ultimately adopted final rule amending RESPA was providing the consumer with additional, clearer, more reliable information related to the loan application process, along with the assurance that the loan that the consumer applied for closely mirrors the loan that the consumer actually signs for and is getting at the closing table. On July 30th, 2008, the Federal Reserve Board published a final rule amending Regulation Z implementing the Truth in Lending Act and the Home Ownership and Equity Protection Act. And on that same day, the United States Congress enacted the Housing and Economic Recovery Act of 2008, which included amendments to the Truth in Lending Act, known as the Mortgage Disclosure Improvement Act of 2008, which we're going to discuss today. The MDIA became effective on July 30th of 2009, which was actually 2 months earlier than it had initially been scheduled to become effective. Before we get into too much of this, what I want to stress to everyone is last year when the discussions began began about modifying, changing, amending the Truth in Lending Act, the intentions behind these amendments were really good intentions. I mean, no one can argue that clearer and more accurate information to the consumer is a bad thing. We all want it to be better informed, especially when we are entering into financial transactions that are as important as purchasing a home or refinancing a home. However, as we are all too aware, additional regulations and additional laws will always have a greater impact, and it will always affect, and sometimes negatively, perhaps more than it was initially intended to do. So you're sitting here probably thinking, this sounds like a talk that she should be giving to a group of bankers or lenders. What does these amendments and modifications to the loan application process have to do with me in my business? And again, as with all new laws, there's going to be a ripple effect, and these new laws will affect a larger group of individuals than were initially intended to be identified. So this new amendment, the MDIA, can affect you in several ways. One of the ways it can affect you is personally. If you are trying to buy a home, or you are needing to refinance the mortgage on your home, this is going to affect you. This new rule, you and your loan officer will be affected by this new rule. If you have properties that are listed for sale, you should be aware of MDIA so that you can educate and explain to your client in advance about possible delays he or she may experience after the buyer signs the contract. This will enable you to educate the seller in advance so that he or she can make plans or prepare if necessary for some delay, or maybe taking a little bit longer to make it to the closing table than he may be used to in the past. So you can, in essence, give your seller a heads up that, hey, this is a new law, it may delay the closing a little bit. If you represent a purchaser in a transaction, then you need to be aware of this act. One of the reasons is to encourage your purchaser to not delay to seek financing. Encourage them to not wait until after the contract has been signed before they begin looking for a lender to finance the transaction. Now, of course, this has always been true to some extent, but with the built-in waiting periods of the MDIA, it's going to be even more true today for you to encourage your client to not delay that aspect of the transaction. Another thing you would want to consider if you are representing a purchaser in a transaction is because the Act strongly emphasizes the lender's role in providing accurate good faith estimates to begin with. Knowledge of the Act would allow you to encourage your purchasers to use trusted lenders and competent lenders so that a repeated redisclosure isn't going to be an issue for your closing. So, what exactly is the MDIA? There's really a massive information out there. If you've done any research independent on this topic, there's just a whole lot of information out there about MDIA. Much of the information out there is of a greater interest to the bankers and the lenders in that industry. So what my purpose today is to boil the Act down and to give you an overview of the details from this Act that I think you should be aware of. As with any law, there's going to be a period of learning. There's going to be a period of learning for the banks and the lenders, and basically getting a grip on these new changes. There will be differences of opinion in the interpretation